Hi. So I see we have 4 viewers in right now. Thank you for coming to the webinar today. I'm going to be joined by April Cunningham. She's one of our librarians and professors, and she's going to be talking to us today about the high cost of textbooks and what we can all do in our classrooms to try to reduce the cost. So April, why don't you introduce yourselves to our viewers?
Hey everybody, this is April. I've met some of you probably, and others of you this is your first time seeing me. I'm a librarian here at Palomar, and I've been here since 2013. The purpose for bringing this professional development workshop together, the impetus for it, was a discussion that came out of Faculty Senate last year, which was about recognizing that there are lots of activities going on around open educational resources, including specifically here in California. And I volunteered to bring together some information and start a conversation on campus about this. So these professional development workshops, I offered one last semester, and the one we have today are just the beginning of that conversation. So I really appreciate Kelly facilitating this today, and I hope that it will be a chance for us to share some ideas, and I have some resources to share with you as our audience that you might consider looking at as professors.
And for those of you guys that are watching, if you're watching it through the Google Plus page, you'll see a button that says Q&A. Click there, you're able to ask us some questions, because I know that April really wants to hear your feedback and know what questions you have. So we would love to hear from you as well. If you're not able to ask questions that way, you can also post a note on the Google Plus page. You can post a comment to the YouTube video, or you could just send me an email, and I'll be monitoring that as April goes through her presentation.
Thanks, Kelly. So the way that this is going to work is I have a set of slides that I created for my face-to-face workshop last semester, so I want to share those with you guys. I'm going to be doing some screen sharing and going back and forth a little bit, so bear with me. That part's a little clunky, but we'll be fine. So I'm going to start my slides now for everybody, and we'll talk you through some of the resources that I have learned about. All right. So first I wanted to start off with just some context. What are we dealing with? Based on research that's been done by some public interest groups, textbook prices have been skyrocketing, rising 82% in the past 10 years. I've seen some other statistics that say that it's fluctuated, but overall we've had this big jump. And we're seeing average.
I'm just going to jump in really quick. Ahead, did you just say that they have risen 82% in the last 10 years?
Yes, those are the statistics that I found. Yeah.
That seems absurd.
It's really, it's extreme. And so we all know that there are some things that textbook companies do to really tie us into that high cost, which some of us know that our textbooks end up with new editions more often than they need to have new editions, or lots of our textbooks now are coming bundled with access codes. And even if students can sell back their book, they can't sell their access code. We know that textbook companies are offering to work with faculty to make customized editions, which are cheaper up front, but then they tend not to be able to be resold on the textbook market, not just to the bookstore, but even like out on the web where people can get a little bit more money back for their textbooks. Those custom editions tend to be hard to sell back. So there are lots of ways that the publishers are really trying to stay ahead of any reductions in their profits that they might be facing. And one reason that they might be facing a reduction in their profits is that we've definitely reached a tipping point, and we probably reached it 15 or 20 years ago, where students really think strategically about which books they're actually going to buy and which they aren't. And we have a lot of students making it through their classes without their books. But as the research showed, 65% of students having chosen not to buy a book, really most of those students felt like it hurt them when they didn't have that book. We also know that a lot of our students use 50%, the statistics say 50% of community college students use financial aid to pay for textbooks, which is not really necessarily what financial aid was designed for. Some of the federal programs really weren't meant to be covering textbooks. So a lot of people feel like that's a waste of those funds, that if we can get the cost of textbooks down, that financial aid can go to what it's really meant for, which is paying for those classes and giving support to students to keep them in school in other ways. It's also a problem to use financial aid to cover your textbooks, because we know that lots of times financial aid doesn't get dispersed right away. So we have students who are counting on that money and aren't getting it in time to get their textbooks. We've seen action at the state level and at the national level, interest from legislators trying to legislate rules about the cost of textbooks. Here in California, our faculty already know that we're expected to put the titles of our textbooks into the actually into the schedule of courses, and one of the reasons for that was to give students a chance to comparison shop about the textbook costs before they take our classes. I have a little video that kind of sums up some of this that I figured I could share. So I will do that one now. Let's see, got this, and then we'll try this one.
Summer's over for these students. Summer's over for these students at the University of Connecticut, and there's nothing like a trip to the campus co-op bookstore to bring them back to reality.
Anybody else need help?
College textbook costs have nearly doubled in the last decade, and the internet that so revolutionized other media is only now starting to impact major players in this multi-billion-dollar market.
This is a human genetics book. This is $250.
$250 for this book.
I rented this for $44.
UConn senior Toyin Akinasotu, a neurobiology major with around $23,000 in student loans, is one of many savvy students looking to pay less. If he bought his entire required reading list, 9 books in total, new from the co-op bookstore on campus, he'd have paid almost $587. But by borrowing, renting, and sourcing free versions online, he saved himself $500.
Of course, you know, the publishers deserve some money. You know, they're the ones that made the book or published it. But in the end, it should be at an affordable level for college students.
Akinasotu's is an increasingly common strategy, and 82% of students now comparison shop online, thanks to a growing number of textbook aggregators and rental sites. Publishers say renting, sharing, and buying books used drives prices up, but critics blame a non-competitive marketplace.
The textbook publishing industry can raise prices with that very little backlash from consumers. Finally, we're reaching the point where students have hit their limit.
How are you?
Bookstores say average annual costs have fallen nearly $100 in the past 5 years, but textbooks and other learning materials remain prohibitively pricey for many students. At Monroe Community College in upstate New York, professors are piloting a course that eliminates publisher textbooks altogether.
This is a barrier for students, and we don't want to have them making choices about buying that textbook or paying gas and electric. Oh, so now we're going to need to do that one on both books.
To save each of their students more than $100, Renee Domino and fellow professor Terry Shamlin worked all summer on a new textbook, relying on open source materials that cost them nothing.
Not only were students going to save money, But instead of going to a publisher that's going to offer a book that is generic, now we could make it specific for Monroe Community College students.
All right, so that's finance. Back at UConn, student organizer Saman Azimi says a similar program here would require an entirely new mindset from faculty and administrators.
A lot of times professors, especially at a research university like UConn, their primary concern is not the textbook itself and how to make it more affordable for their students. It's doing their research.
The most book-smart students are doing their research into online prices, creating a competitive market with increased choice and decreased costs. A lesson straight from the pages of Econ 101.
All right, so that gives you some other examples of how students are handling this problem, a few more statistics. So overall, my goals for today, I'm definitely not here as an expert. I can talk about my own experience working with students here in the library because we see a lot of students who have questions about textbook costs. But I'm just starting to learn about the variety of approaches that we can take to help students. So as I said, this is the beginning of a conversation. So your questions that you have today, I'm happy to try to answer them and to field them the best I can. But some of them we may just need to add to a list of questions and look at more as a campus. What can we do? So please feel free to ask any questions. And if I don't have the answer for you today, then I'll follow up with you. So what I did today was break my presentation into two parts. So first I'm going to talk about locally what we do here at Palomar, some things that are already in place. And then I'm going to talk about things that are happening at a larger scale with open educational resources. And please, Kelly, feel free to jump in with questions as I go through. All right. So the thing that I'm most familiar with, and there's an error on this slide. So the first thing I want to talk about are our library reserves, course reserves here in the library. So I have numbers for, yeah, this is an older version. So I have numbers for this semester. So that was from last year. This semester, we are, we've had 13,000 uses of our reserve textbooks at San Marcos so far this academic year, and 726 so far at Escondido. You know, we think about the library, we think about books, right? But really the highest circulation of any materials we have here in the library are not the books that we buy to support student research. It's all of our reserve textbooks. Those circulate more than anything else. Our students use them.
So can I jump in really quick and just ask you, because I've had a lot of faculty ask me, you know, well, how do I know if the textbook is there? So is it the faculty's responsibility to contact the library and ensure a copy is there? Like how do you fill those reserves?
That's a great question. So primarily, we rely on professors to tell us, to provide copies that they have.
When you say provide copies that they have, so would they need to actually purchase one of the books to give to you, or request it from their publisher in order to give it to the library, or can you request it from the publisher? What are the steps to make that happen?
Yes, that's a great question. So I know that there's a gray area with something like a desk copy that you get provided by the publishers. Publishers in a lot of areas have stopped providing desk copies because they worry about faculty providing it to students. So a desk copy is where you ask for a copy of the book from the publisher to have a chance sometimes just to review it before you decide to assign it. Other times, because you have assigned it and you need your own copy, publishers will sometimes provide a copy to you as the instructor. because publishers are really concerned about the use of those copies for textbook reserves, they have put limitations on them. So that's something that the faculty member, him or herself, really needs to decide, is do they have a copy that they feel like they can legitimately give to us for reserve. So you could, in that case, buy a copy on your own and provide it to us, and we would keep it here. That's how we get a lot of our reserves, is from faculty members themselves. We also have, every semester, we've been fortunate in the last few years to get some funds from the foundation. And so, like, when people go and support at the gala or make donations directly to the foundation feels really strongly that providing reserve textbooks for students improves their success. And so every year we get a little bit less money for the textbook reserves, but lately we've been getting about $8,000, and we use that money to do after having done an analysis of the courses where some of our very highly enrolled courses where we have many, many sections that are using the same textbooks. Those are the ones that we identify ourselves, and we buy those textbooks. So sometimes we have a faculty member's textbook without them having given us anything. But it really is up to the faculty member to know whether or not we have something for their class. We definitely do not automatically have textbooks. We don't use our general fund, our funds for our book budget to buy textbooks. We just can't. It would take our whole book.
Where do we have like a list online that says all the textbooks that you have, or how would they find out if you already have the textbook? I guess I'm just trying to figure out like where to go. Is there a spot on the library website that they can check it, or is there a certain person that they should call?
That's a great question. I can actually share with you my screen and show you on the library's website where you can search for your own course. So let me do that now. So now you're seeing the library's website. And if you are looking at the search box in the center of our website, you'll see one of the options is a textbook search. So when you click on textbook search, then you can put in here your course. So let's say history. Oh, sorry, that's not where I want to put it. I apologize. My screen looks funky. So down here under search for, I can enter my course here. And what it shows me is that there are 29 items on reserve for History 102 classes. When I click on the name of the course, it will take me to a list of those 29 items. And now I can scroll through. So that's one way to do it, to find out what we already have on reserve for the same class that you're teaching. Obviously, up here at the top, if you just put in the title of your textbook, you can also find out if we have it that way. So if it's a specific title, that's probably the quickest way. If you want to browse what's already on reserve by other people teaching your same course, then that course search is really effective.
So I have a question, and I'm not sure what the answer to this one's going to be. But what if somebody has an ebook? Is there any way to share ebooks in the library?
That's another great question. Ebooks give publishers a lot of control. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why publishers really like selling them. Because they really often, you're just licensed that copy of an ebook. And so most of the ebooks that the library licenses, they're licensed for only one user at a time. So even if you found that the library had your ebook already, that is something that only one student would be able to look at once. That might still be a good option, but that's where we're at. If you have your own ebook, it's very unlikely that there's any way for you to provide access because of the way that usually it requires either that it's already loaded on a specific device that's licensed and is licensed to you that way, or where you've had some sort of access code. So ebooks tend not to be easy for us to share with students in reserves, but that's an excellent question.
I figured, but I wasn't sure if we had made any progress towards it. Actually, Carmi Minor Flores is watching right now, and she had a really good comment and question. And she said, to help students save money, I use an earlier edition where there's little change in the newer edition. Do instructors do something similar? So I will say that I do. I tend to tell my students that they can use older versions. But I have noticed recently that it seems the older versions are almost just as expensive as the newer ones. So I don't know what's going on with that. What's your experience with that, April? Do you see a lot of faculty using older editions to try to cut the cost down?
Yes, and that actually does overlap with our reserves too, because sometimes it's hard, especially if it's a book that we've purchased with foundation funds. We can't necessarily, sometimes we do, but we can't necessarily keep up with new editions. So we've bought an edition in a year that we had money, maybe the next year or 2 years there's a new edition, but we don't have the funds to buy that new edition. So using an older edition, if you know that we have that one on reserve, can also be a good option. What I see some students who have really, are really fortunate to have faculty who have spent their own time, the faculty's own time, figuring out what the differences are in the editions and being able to help students kind of have a crosswalk between an edition that the professor might be talking about in class and the edition that's available to students either cheaper because it's used and is an older edition, or available because it's on reserve. So that's a great question.
Connie just said that her students were able to find her textbook for $8.
Beautiful.
That's awesome.
That's totally awesome.
Yeah, $8. They should all be $8.
So one of the issues, although our reserves are great and students love them, we get a lot of feedback from students that there's just not enough time to use them because they can only use them here in the building. Almost all of them. I will say that there are some exceptions, so I'll talk about that in a minute. But almost all of our reserves, the ones that we buy with foundation money, and almost all of the personal copies end up being 2-hour use in the building. And that works really well for students who are on campus a lot. But for a lot of our students, I was talking to a student last night who's taking classes out at Camp Pendleton. Her textbooks are going to cost $300. We have them on reserve here, but those reserves don't really help her. So that's a situation where professors can actually set their own circulation periods for books that they have given to us. So if you wanted a textbook to be able to circulate for 2 days or even more, you could do that as a faculty member. That's up to you.
But you bring up a really good point right there, April, and it's that even though we have these reserves, which are fantastic that we have them, it's still only available for our students that are on our San Marcos campus. So it really raises the question of what other things can we do, and that kind of brings me back to the video that you just showed, which is saying, there are so many other options available online. And, should we be looking at all these other websites or even trying to figure out ways to create our own textbooks that would be available to all of our students, no matter where they're taking the course, whether it's online or face-to-face and on any of our campuses.
Exactly. And so that also brings up the options for open education resources. And we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. But first, I wanted to say just a couple more things about other things that are happening on campus. So one of the other things to know about, which I did not really know about until I started teaching myself this in preparation for this session, is that there are 2 sources of financial support from the campus itself. So I mentioned financial aid. That's not an ideal situation for students to use on their textbooks. The campus here locally offers a textbook purchase loan program. That one requires an application that students fill out, and the loan can be up to $250. It is just a loan, and the repayment is required in 60 days. So what I assume they're thinking is that this is for students who will have financial aid dispersed or had some specific setback at the beginning of a semester, but can expect to have that money ready in 60 days. 60 days is pretty fast to make up for up to $250 as a student to be able to pay that back. And there's some pretty steep problems for a student if they don't repay their loan. And there are more details about that on the textbook purchase loan program website. But overall, I mean, you can imagine anything that students don't pay, it starts to affect their ability to sign up for more classes and to get their transcripts and all that kind of stuff. So the loan is a little dicey. I mean, the good part is there's no, as far as I could tell, there's no expectation of any interest, obviously, on the loan. But still, that could be a pretty big obstacle. And then there's a grant program where through the foundation, textbook assistance program, that also requires a statement of need for the application. For the fall semester, you can't apply any earlier than August 6th. So you can't like plan way ahead. The loan is, I mean, for that grant is for up to $200. And the advice that they give to students applying for that assistance is they suggest that students use that $200 to rent their textbooks so that the money goes further. There are some definite strengths to renting a textbook, but again, that's definitely a sunk cost. You don't then have a textbook that you could sell on Amazon to make up a big part of that cost. So it's just gone. But since it's a grant, you know, maybe that makes sense.
So April, Carmi just asked, what about the 3SP funds funding the library stock of textbooks?
Yeah, we would be very open to that. That isn't something that we, I don't think that's something we've pursued yet, but I will definitely bring that question forward to my colleagues. Does Carmi know anything else? I mean, is that something that she's heard floated, or is that a new idea that she's just proposing?
I'll wait to see if she responds, but she had just asked that question, which I think is a really important question that we ask. You
Definitely.
know, and I kind of am thinking also going back to the student you just talked about at Camp Pendleton, because if we are purchasing these reserves for San Marcos, we really should be purchasing these reserves for Escondido and Camp Pendleton and the South Center whenever the South Center is open. So I wonder if that's something we need to talk about as well, is, you know, when we are purchasing this for one location, we need to be purchasing for all. And so maybe that is something that 3SP and equity funds, actually, I would think, because we want to make sure that we are providing the same service to students no matter where they're taking their courses. So it might be something good to talk about.
Yeah, I think it's definitely worth
council. You're on that council, right?
No, I'm not on that one. I think that Katie Farrell French is the one who
okay.
is on 3SP.
So Carmi, we'll work on that.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Carmi. I will say that Escondido has a reserve collection, and one of the things that happens out there when I'm there is that collection is developed for the courses at Escondido, but we know that there are some students who will study at Escondido but are taking classes at San Marcos, and so at that we haven't been able to, with our funds, duplicate much of the collection of reserves at Escondido that we have at San Marcos. Does that make sense? Just to make things go further, we try to focus, but that definitely does lead to some problems for students sometimes.
Yeah. So Carmi just said she works at another campus where they're doing something similar. So I'm assuming she's saying that she's working at another campus that is using the 3SP funds, and they're also using BSI funds to support their library reserves, I assume. Yep. So maybe that is something that we should think about.
Those are great suggestions, because we can see from the use and from when we survey students that those reserves in the library are super important, and then just trying to think creatively about how to make it also useful for students who aren't here every day at the San Marcos campus. So I really appreciate that coming up. So that is exactly, that's it. That leads me to the next question, which is, what are other things that you guys know about or are doing for students on campus about this issue that we're all facing with textbook costs? Sorry. So I can wait a minute while people type in and see if we get other questions or suggestions before I move on to open education resources.
It might be good to just move on, because I think part of it is, well, I'll speak for myself and some other people I've talked to, but I've always thought about, you know, creating my own textbook, and then I think, oh my gosh, that's going to take so much time. So I think it's important that we all realize that there are open educational resources available, and if we started to look at those, then taking on the task of creating our own textbook maybe wouldn't be so daunting.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. So with the open education resources, the first one I'm going to talk about is the one here in California. Overall, national surveys of faculty show that only at some places, it might be different here, but overall, only about a quarter to a third of professors are aware of open textbook projects. And open education resources are an example of an open, or include open textbook projects. So knowing that that is something that overall is still new for people, and we're still kind of adjusting to this idea, that's one reason for this workshop, is just to raise awareness that these exist. Open textbooks, the research that has been done on them show that they can improve student retention and success because of that, reducing that barrier, not having to make that decision about whether or not to buy the textbook, having access to the textbook all the time. Those are some really strong points in favor of open educational resources. I don't think that there's anything in place right now, although, you know, I could see there being proposals through BSI or some of the other big grants we have right now. But right now, as far as I know, there's nothing specifically happening on our campus to support faculty in creating their own textbook. That would be an open resource. This wouldn't be supporting a faculty member to make a textbook and then sell it necessarily, but this would be an open textbook that would be available to students. There are other, and so that is something that's happening in some places. Some universities are giving grants to faculty who are creating open educational resources. Other universities are even giving grants to faculty who want to restructure their courses just to use existing open textbooks. So that's another idea because it is a lot of time, right? It's a lot of time to find the resources, even if you're not creating your own. It's a lot of time to transition from one text to another if you've been using one for a long time. So some institutions are supporting that process by giving support through grants to faculty. Another thing, and we're not going to talk about this too much, so I'll mention it right now. These other examples don't really cover this, but one other option to think about, depending on the type of course you're teaching, is to look to see what materials our library already licenses through our databases, and to direct students to a set of those already existing licensed articles, for example, or ebooks, instead of a textbook. So just keeping that in the back of your mind, that that is another way that open education resources are kind of relevant.
So I just went to that website, and so I'm actually going to share my screen right now.
Great.
And I looked up to try to find if there were any health textbooks. And first off, there's an anatomy and physiology, and I know that that is an expensive textbook. So here's one that is a free open textbook. And then I did find one, contemporary health issues. So that's something that I will kind of look through and see if it would be something I could use in my course. But I look at these too, and I think if all of these are in the free and open educational resources, I could then assign a chapter out of one book and a chapter out of another book, correct?
Totally.
Yeah, so how cool is that? It really just means I would need to take a little time and figure out which books, like I'm sure in anatomy and physiology that I could find things on cardiovascular system and muscles that I could use in my health textbook, so, or my health class. So that is pretty cool.
Definitely cool. So what
Now I need more time in my life.
exactly. So what Kelly is looking at right now is through Cool for Ed, and it's partnered with Merlot, and Merlot's been around for a long time as a place to share electronic resources. But the Cool for Ed, the Open Educational Resources Initiative, started in 2012, and it was a state legislated by the state legislature. SB 1052 directed a council to determine a list of the 50 most widely taken lower division courses in not just community college, but also in our other segments, so in the CSUs and the UCs. So the 50 most common lower division courses, and they were supposed to find or create open textbooks for those 50 courses.
That's awesome. I just pulled up on my screen kind of just how I got to that. I essentially just went to find and just free and open textbooks. And then I scrolled down just to see, and I went and just found my topic. So if anybody's curious how to find textbooks in their area, it was really easy. I just found free resources in 2 minutes.
This source also does some reviewing of the textbooks, so that can be really helpful too. That there's some of them that haven't been edited.
Is that the text right here where it says eText reviews?
Yes.
Okay, that's awesome.
So that will save you some of that time of needing to look through everything. These are some that have already been kind of vetted.
Okay.
The funding that funded this project initially has now ended, and now it's being funded through CSU. And actually, they're still accepting proposals for open textbooks. If you wanted to make one, the deadline for proposals is June 30th. So just kind of have that in the back of your mind too. So like Kelly was showing, there's textbooks for lots of different subjects. And it can also be a place, there's also an option, I'm not sure how widely used it is, but if you're seeing my slide for Open Educational Resources Cool for Ed, you can see that drop down for find also includes find colleagues in your discipline. So that's another way to get connected with other people who are worried about the same thing, how to find a good textbook for the same kind of course that you're teaching.
And the free and open access journals and articles, that's really great also.
Totally. Yeah, there's a lot of really interesting stuff here if you have time to look through it. Besides the California projects that are going on, there's also a project that's bringing together research and state universities from across the country. And this open textbook library is hosted through the University of Minnesota, I think. Let's see. And they have a whole Center for Open Education. So I can share this one with you. So this is similar to the Cool for Ed. It's just put together by a different group. You can see that this one puts their reviews right out on the front page, is offering quick links to new books that have just been added, whole textbook on college writing, for example. They are similarly organized with browsing by subject for your textbooks. And then, as I said, this is part of the Center for Open Education. So if this is something that you get passionate about and you're really interested in, the Center for Open Education is one of the best places to go to find out what's being done and kind of get involved.
Cool.
So I will go back to my slides. There's also one through Rice University called OpenStax College, and they're a little bit more, they are, I think, are kind of putting their own stamp on these books a little bit more. So the books become part of the OpenStax. You can also see that this project is partly funded by some of the groups that want to do some educational reform. So that is, I want to acknowledge, one concern that has been shared by people who are sensitive to privatizing higher ed and corporatizing. There's some concern that there's going to be pressure to adopt open textbooks from people, the pressure coming from people outside of higher ed who want to influence what we do. And so what I would say is, like a lot of things, this is something where the more we can get ahead of the problem, then we get to set the terms of how we solve the problem. So it's really...
Sorry, can you explain that a little bit, just what the concern is a little bit more? Are they concerned that then if we're going to these free resources that are produced by people, that then we are teaching what these people want us to teach? Is that kind of where the concern comes from?
I think the concern starts from the concern of making sure that faculty still have the freedom to choose the textbook that's best for their class. If there's too much pressure to only use open resources, then you're limited in your choice. That's not something that's happened at Palomar, and so far it's not something that's happened across the board. So far, faculty still choose their own textbooks. Ideally, even within a department, there's some flexibility about what textbooks you use. Definitely within an institution, that should be up to the faculty to choose. The concern is that if you're only allowed to use open textbooks, that then you don't have very many to choose from, and potentially there's concern about either the quality of those textbooks or the point of view of the textbooks too. I think you could start to have a problem with that. That's kind of a long view problem, right? But there are people who want to keep their eye on that. So I just wanted to acknowledge that in this discussion. I think that we're already getting to a point where faculty, where it's so much easier for faculty to make their own materials and to pick and choose from existing things, that I don't foresee that actually being an issue, that we're ever going to be told just to use one textbook and everybody uses the same textbook. I don't foresee that, but
I find all of these resources as almost giving me more choice. You know, I look through my textbook and I always think, oh, I don't really like, I like the book as a whole, but I don't really like this one chapter. And the only thing that I could have done about it in the past is create a customized version with the publisher and said, okay, well, I don't like chapter 10 on exercise, but I like this other book's chapter 10. And then you can customize that way by putting pieces of different books together through a publisher. Well, now I have the opportunity where I can actually take the parts of each of these resources and articles and everything that's now available. So for me, it seems like I have more choice.
I think that ideally that is what it leads to, is exactly right. More choice, more access, more leverage when you are talking to publishers to say, I do have all this choice. I still think that your product is the best one, but only given certain parameters. So I think that potentially it actually gives faculty a lot more control over their choices. I think that's a really good point. Let's see, where am I at? So those are the three main open education resource websites right now that I'm aware of. So if anybody in the audience has additional ones that they want to add, that would be a great resource to know about. It can be fun to explore these in your discipline and kind of see what's out there, make comparisons. And one of the things that is really important about thinking about this change potentially is considering within your own department or area how to support each other, right? How to share some of the load of looking through these resources, how to share some of the load of making the transition to open education resources, especially as we bring on new faculty, whether full-time or part-time. How can we invite them to consider these as they're building a new class? Because that can be a great time to choose something like this, so you're not trying to redo a class. And I really love Kelly's suggestion, if you do start to want to add some of these, that you can do it a little bit at a time. So sticking with some of the stuff you already use and then seeing where you can add in open education resources. A lot of faculty do it that way. Research shows that many faculty who use open education resources still require a textbook, but maybe they're able to require a textbook that is a lower cost print textbook because they don't need it to do everything, because they have these other resources that are open that they can add to it.
So one thing that I started to think about as I was kind of thinking, okay, I want to start looking at these things and figuring out which ones might be an option and how I could piece them together to get the information that I need. And then you start to think, okay, well, how am I going to house that? You know, and how do I figure out, or what resource do I want to use to point the students in the right direction? You know, and I thought, well, we have our learning management system, so you could potentially put an item into your Blackboard course that then links, and it has chapter 1, chapter 2, or however you want to set it up, or by topic, that would automatically link to that book online. You know, that would be kind of one way that you could try to put it together. But I guess one concern I think people might have if you were to do it that way, because these are all online resources, obviously, is what about the student that wants that paper text? You know, is there any way of doing that for them? Or they would have to print it themselves? What do you think?
That's a great question. Some of these open education resources do offer, and so I'm checking right now to see if this is one of them. Some of them do offer print on demand. Specifically, okay. I can tell that the OpenStax College, the one that we're looking at right here, does do that. So let's see if I can find a page where I could show that to you.
I'm sorry, what are you doing right now? You're trying to find...
Yep, I'm going to share with you my screen for OpenStax, because I know OpenStax in particular, and I would have to look at the other ones too to see how much they do this, but I know OpenStax in particular makes it pretty clear how you can print on demand. So this is the physics textbook. Here are the details about the book, and then here where it says get this book, you do have the option of ordering through, in this case, Amazon would print on demand and send it to you for $48.50. It looks like there might be some options to partner with bookstores. But this is all very new to me, so I'm still learning how all of that works. But like you said, lots of students don't like an electronic textbook, but this gives them the option. Because it also is formatted in PDF, students could choose, that would be an easy way to have it in a format that students could print themselves if there were certain sections that they particularly wanted to print and others that they wanted to read online. So,
you know what else is really cool about it being in PDF is I have an app on my phone called VZ Books, and it's a text to audio app, and it only works with PDFs. So any PDF I can put in it. So if I'm reading any PDFs and I don't want to read anymore and I'd rather listen to it, I just upload them into that app and I can listen to it while I'm driving in the car. Or, you know, for our students when they're writing on the Sprinter or wherever they're at, that they could actually use an app like that and have their books read to them. Be kind of cool since it's in PDF format.
Yeah, that's totally cool. So I think that a lot of the online education resources are trying to find this way to let students have that choice. If they do want to have a print copy, that they make it as easy as possible for students to do that. So I'm really glad you brought that up. That's an important question. They don't, just because they're open, doesn't mean they have to be online. They could still be print. So that gets us to the end of my information. I did provide a list of references. Mostly these are references to the statistics that I gave. If you want to read more about the issue that's facing our students. And then within the presentation, there are the links to the actual tools. So you can see that on each of the slides.
Awesome. Thanks so much, April. And then one thing that I'll do as well is, April, if you could actually send me the link to that Google presentation, I will put it on the PD blog. I also am in the process of putting all of those links to the open educational resources to textbooks on the PD blog too, so people will be able to go there and look at it. Kind of one last question I have, and this came up in the video that you played. They made a statement that said, really for us to move into the direction of using these free textbooks and these open educational resources is that it really takes a new mindset of the faculty and the college. What do you think that we would need to do to move that direction? Or like, do you feel that we are leaning that way or we're not? Are there a lot of barriers? Do you think that people will take these opportunities? Where do you foresee it going?
I think that there is a lot of interest in the alternatives to textbooks. I do sense that among faculty. In terms of the institution, I don't hear this conversation coming up where, as Carmi was pointing out, where you think it might, where in our basic skills meetings and SSSP and equity, those are places where talking about students' access to their instructional materials, I think really does overlap with a lot of these other goals that our campus has. And I'm not hearing the conversation, and I'm not bringing the conversation either. You know, it's I'm taking responsibility for that myself. But that would be one sign, I think, that there is institutional interest and buy-in to making a big shift. Because, like I said, there are ways that the institution overall can support individual faculty choices. It's important to note that the advocates for open education resources make it clear that it is vital that we do not demand that faculty make this change, right? That won't work. But making it easier for faculty to make a choice that they already want to make by giving them support, by having these conversations at the institution level, I think would be really positive. But I know that a lot of this will happen within departments and just between faculty colleagues, making small changes that then kind of lead to bigger changes. It's exciting.
Well, I know you just said that you haven't done enough, but you have. And that's what you're doing right here with this PD workshop is getting this information out, because I think one of the most important things we need to do is just make people aware that these options are available, that they're easy to use, and that we do have options, you know, and there are things, because I do think a lot of faculty are, you know, aware that textbooks are extremely expensive, and we want to be doing everything we can to support the success of our students and make sure that we can retain them, and that finances isn't what keeps them away from the college, especially as we keep talking about all of the enrollment management issues we have, and the fact that we do need to do things to support success and retention, try to get our enrollment back up. So thank you so much for doing this with me today. I think it went pretty good. I think hopefully we'll do some more Google Hangouts in the future. Maybe we'll do one with you, April, on our information literacy and maybe our dashboard program.
That would be fantastic. I'm so grateful to have this opportunity, and I hope that the faculty who see this in as a recording will also feel free to get in touch with me and follow up. I'm happy to be a resource. As I said, I'm still learning, but I think we can all learn together, and that would be really exciting. So thank you, Kelly, for making this possible.
Thank you. I wouldn't have been able to do it. I didn't even know about some of those. So thank you so much, April. Thanks for being brave enough to do a video with me. I really appreciate it. And thanks everyone else for watching. Share the video with your colleagues. It will be available on the PD blog and on YouTube. So feel free to come back, watch it again. And as I said before, I will have the links to those resources, as well as the link to April's presentation on the PD blog for anybody to look at after the fact. So thank you, and thank you, April.
Have a great day.
Bye. Okay, you too. Bye.